Krishna, dear devotees, please accept my humble obeisances always to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you all very much for joining His Holiness Candramauli Swami Maharaja's daily call. Today we are going to continue the Srimad Bhagavatam series of first canto, 10th chapter, that is Departure of Lord Krishna to Dwaraka. And we are on the verse number 5. Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances always to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you so much, Maharaj. In your busy schedule, you are giving us time. Thank you so much. You can please take over. I'll share my screen again.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Verse number 5. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Nadya Samudra Giraya. Savanaspati Viruda. Palayo Sadhyaya Sarva. Kama Anritu Tasyavai. Translation: the rivers, oceans, hills, mountains, forests, creepers, and active drugs in every season pay their tax quota to the king in profusion. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Since Maharaj Yudhisthira was under the protection of Ajita, the infallible Lord, as mentioned above, the properties of the Lord, namely rivers, oceans, forests, etc., were all pleased and used to supply their respective quota of taxes to the king. The secret of success is to take refuge under the protection of the Supreme Lord. Without his sanction, nothing can be possible. To make economic development by our own endeavors on the strength of tools and machinery is not all. The sanction of the Supreme Lord must be there. Otherwise, despite all instrumental arrangements, everything will be unsuccessful. And the ultimate cause of success is the Daiva, the Supreme King. Like Maharaj Yudhisthira knew perfectly well that the king is the agent of the Supreme Lord to look after the welfare of the mass of people. Actually, the state belongs to the Supreme Lord. The rivers, oceans, forests, hills, drugs, etc. are not creations of man. They are all creations of the Supreme Lord, and the living being is allowed to make use of the property of the Lord for the service of the Lord. Today's slogan is that everything is for the people, and therefore the government is for the people and by the people. But to produce a new species of humanity at the present moment on the basis of God consciousness and perfection of human life, the ideology of godly communism, the world has to again follow the footsteps of kings like Maharaj Yudhisthira or Pariksit. There is enough of everything by the will of the Lord, and we may make proper use of things to live comfortably without enmity between man and man, or man and animal, or man and nature. The control of the Lord is everywhere. If the Lord is pleased, every part of nature will be pleased. The rivers will flow profusely to fertilize the land. The ocean will supply sufficient quantities of minerals, pearls, and jewels. The forest will supply sufficient wood, drugs, and vegetables, and the seasonal changes will effectively help produce fruits and flowers in profuse quantity. The artificial way of living, depending on factories and tools, can render so-called happiness only to a limited number at the cost of millions. Since the energy of the mass of people is engaged in factory production, the natural products are being hampered, and for this the mass is unhappy. Without being educated properly, the mass of people are following in the footsteps of vested interests by exploiting natural reserves, and therefore there's an acute competition between individual and nation and nation. There is no control by the trained agent of the Lord. We must look to the defects of modern civilization by comparison here, and should follow in the footsteps of Maharaj Yudhisthira to cleanse man and wipe out anachronisms. Magyan timidandasya gina jana salakaya chaksun militam yena tasmai shri gurave namaha ma om Vishnu padaya Krishna prestaya bhutale Srimakti Bhakti Vedanta Swami iti namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pachari. May never say Sasunyavadi Pasyat Yere Sitarni Vanchakalpa Tarubhischa Pipa Sindhu Aivacha Hitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namaho Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, we heard from the previous verse, and this verse also, that the Supreme King of all kings, which is the Supreme Lord, when he is pleased, then everything in human nature works nicely to provide the living entities everything they need and prospers and to prosper. When there is inordinate anomalies in the leadership of the government, or what they say the deputed head of state, then people are in, a marginal position. And few people gain economically, and others have to struggle hard. And therefore, in that anomaly means in this case, digression from the natural flow of the order of the Lord, or the natural arrangement of the order of the Lord. There are so many withholding of the material energy by the material energy. In other words, people they have to struggle hard for what they need, and very few people capitalize on the situation, and others are in a needy position, poverty position, struggling. Although, as it says here, and this is a very important point, there is no scarcity in the world of anything what is needed. There is a philosophy, which is now part of the modern day philosophy. It has been there for years, but now it's starting to surface, that the earth cannot sustain large amounts of population. And so it is considered that today's population is too large. So therefore, because of that inability for the earth to provide everything needed for everyone, there is scarcity. And therefore, everyone is struggling and suffering. So the idea is to reduce the population of the world through various situations. And so this is called, there was an economist called Thomas Malthus. So his idea was, he says, you must have war, you must have pestilence, disease, epidemics. You must have these things. Otherwise, there will be too many people and the earth will suffer, and therefore there will be, people will suffer for not getting what they need, and there will be disproportions. Prabhupada deals with this statement directly, quoting the same person, and says, it's not that there are too many people on the earth. He said, the earth is the energy of the Lord. And the Lord's energy, along with the Lord, is working under the care of the Lord. And so, if people are pious and God conscious, then the earth, as Prabhupada would say, could supply 10 times enough resources for, in other words, the population could multiply 10 times from what it is now. Say we have almost 7 billion, 7.5 billion, 8 billion. If you multiply that by 10, you get 70 or 80 billion people on the earth. The Prabhupada said the earth could sustain any number of population if people live according to the direction of the Lord. In other words, if people are God conscious, follow Brahminical culture, protects the cows, and are governed by a righteous king, a righteous president. Then, because that righteous president, as it mentions here, is the representative of the Supreme Lord, the Lord, through the material energy, as it says in the Bhagavad Gita, Anan Bhavanti Bhutani Parjanya Anasambhava Jal Bhavati Bhutani Parjanyan Sambhavam Bhava. Can't remember the last line. But in that verse, it's in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, that when there is sacrifice, there is rains. When there is rains, there is fertilization of the fields, and then crops grow. And this all comes when people live accordingly. Just like in the age of Satya Yuga, it would not rain during the daytime. It would only rain at night, regularly. And while people were resting in the evening, the areas would be fertilized with water or saturated with water. And then when the sun would come out the next day, then everything would be, the land would get the nourishment from the sun and the water, and crops would grow. People had enough for what they needed for livelihood and even more. So, but because God has set down the laws by which people can live properly. Ishavasham midam sarvam yat kichet yan digat chagat tena jaktena bundi jaham madgridahakasaswidanam. Everything in existing is owned and controlled by the Supreme Lord. And therefore, if one wants to live happily, they have to live according to their quota. Quota means what they are destined to receive by natural arrangements, by honest work and natural arrangements. And when that is done, then it says, the next verse, it says that people can live, aspire to live for hundreds of years. So nowadays, people don't live long, and there's such a struggle in order to maintain oneself. Why? Because the population is sinful. And when there is sinful population, just like you see in the 4th canto, this particular philosophy is very much brought out in the 4th canto in the story of the appearance of Maharaj Prithu in the world. He is a righteous king. He's an energy of the Supreme Lord. And prior to his rule, there was a very vicious and very cruel king named King Vena. King Vena was actually an energy not an energy, but his father was actually pious, but his mother was a demon. His father married a demoniac girl, and it says that the son takes on the qualities of the mother, the daughter takes on the qualities of the father. That's a general statement. It's not an absolute statement, but if you observe, you can also see that is the tendency. So he took on the qualities of his mother, and he became vicious in his rule and started to attack people in general, and made it very difficult for people to live. And he wanted to stop all Brahminical sacrifices, and he wanted to be known as the Supreme Lord himself, and he wanted to be worshipped as God. So the Brahmins were there, but they were always trying to explain to him that this is not the way to rule. But he was avaricious. He was licentious. In other words, he had many bad qualities. And so in order for saintly rule to be reestablished, the Brahmins got together. The Brahmins were quite powerful in those days. And they performed a yajna. First, they warned him that if he doesn't do something to change, they will do something to remove him. And he laughed at that. He thought his power was all in all. But the yajna was successful, and they killed him in the yajna. Brahmins can do that. Paka Brahmins, they have the power to perform yajnas, and they can kill, a demoniac person, or they can kill a whole demoniac race. We have the example of when Janmanjaya, the father of Parikshit, I'm sorry, not the son of Parikshit, not the father of Parikshit. Janmanjaya was the son of Parikshit. When Parikshit was eventually killed by that snake bird, that was the curse. He was to die in 7 days. When he heard what happened to his son, he performed a yajna to kill all the snakes in the world. And by the power of that yajna, snakes were coming from all over and flying into the yajna fire and dying one after another. At one point, Brahma came and stopped him and said, "Listen, you can't kill all the snakes. It's not just because of one snake." And so he listened to Lord Brahma, and he stopped the yajna. But this is the power of a Brahmin. A Brahmin can do that if he's a Paka Brahmin, first-class Brahmin. He has those abilities. If a Brahmin curses, that curse will come. If the Brahmin blesses, that blessing will come. So the Brahminical culture, at least during the Vedic times, was very powerful. Nowadays, that's lost because people don't follow the Brahminical culture anymore. And therefore, those who are Brahmins, they are more or less interested in livelihood through Brahminical activities, and not so much benefiting the people in general. So when King Vena was killed, they took his body, and because his body also had some element of saintliness that was there from his father's side, they churned his body as is described, and then one person came out, and his name was Bahuka. He was a low-class person. And the second person who actually was born was Maharaj Prithu, a saintly king. And when he saw what happened to the earth after he took his rule after many years, he understood that there was an anomaly in Mother Nature giving the resources for people to live. And so he called Mother Earth, Bhumi Devi herself, and wanted to know why she was withholding. And he threatened her that if you continue to withhold, I'm going to punish you. And he had that power. He was such a powerful king. but he was a Rajarsi. He was spiritually oriented. So sacrifices were performed, and gradually, one by one, all of the needs of the living entities were again resupplied by nature. So when people say, well, there's so many problems in the world, people are not getting enough food to eat, there's shortages here, there. This is not due to the earth, it's due to the demoniac rule within society, which is as favors a few people, exploits the rest, and people are suffering. But nature automatically supplies everything, just like it says here. The control of the Lord is everywhere. And when the Lord is pleased, every part of nature will be pleased. The river will flow profusely to fertilize the land. The oceans will supply sufficient quantities of minerals, pearls, and jewels. The forest will supply sufficient wood, drugs, and vegetables, and the seasonal changes will effectively help to produce fruits and flowers in profuse quantity. Now here is the natural arrangement by the Lord. It's interesting, this is mentioned, and I also included in the book that I just published, where it says that there is a certain constellation, it's called Swasti. The Swasti constellation, when it comes within the heavenly realms, this is an arrangement of stars in a certain formation. When it rains during that time, during the Swasti constellation, that rain, when it falls on the head of an elephant, it produces jewels. When it falls on the head of a snake, it'll produce jewels. And when it falls onto the ocean, it produces pearls, which are then eaten by oysters. And that's why these oysters have pearls, because they eat these jewels, pearls, when they float into the water coming by the rains at that particular constellation. This is an example how by the higher arrangements, everything is available by nature through God's arrangement. When God is pleased, everyone will benefit. When God is not pleased, when you have leadership in the world that is avaricious, greedy for power, and exploitive in nature, killing cows, killing babies, making policies for war in different places, then the whole world is topsy-turvy, and there is so many problems on all levels. And nature will withhold because of the sinful nature, sinful mindedness of the people in general. So the answer is God consciousness. But here, what is really being pushed is that in order for God consciousness to be established throughout the world, there must be a saintly king, or a king that is at least guided by the saints. In other words, you have the kings are called Kshatriyas. Kshatriya, Shat means harm, and Triya means to protect from. Kshatriya means they give protections from the people. They protect the people against, various problems, and at the same time, they provide everything needed for the people through their legislation, through their rule. And they are concerned about the needs of the people, and also that people live according to the principles of Dharma or religiousness. Prabhupada said a real leader within society will make a law that everyone must worship the Lord. And Prabhupada qualifies that, not that everyone has to follow a particular form of worship, but that worship of the Lord must be there within society. And if people are not worshiping the Lord, then there's education and various programs to educate people that to worship the Lord is actually the goal of human life. And when you have such a king or leader, president, monarch, head of state, then people will start to live according to the principles of Dharma. In other words, people will be at least pious. Even if they're not Krishna conscious, they will be pious. In other words, they will look for the welfare, they will do good to others, and they will live according to the arrangement given by God through the material energy nature. So the Lord has a plan, and it's even mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita and in Srimad Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam deals not only with spiritual philosophy and transcendental knowledge, but it also gives directions how one should live. Like that. And it's simple living, high thinking. In other words, live according to your needs, not to your greeds. And, if you have extra, share with others, both time, energy, and resources. And that way everyone will get whatever they need. And people will be happy because the Supreme Lord will be worshipped like that. So that is Brahminical culture. Brahminical culture means that culture which is guided by religious principles, not by man-made legislations to favor one particular group over another, to exploit one area of the Lord at the expense of people in different places. And nowadays, within the world, you don't find such leadership. You find sometimes in some cases, some countries, people are a little bit better than others, but basically the leaders in today's world are quite avaricious, demoniac, and self-interested. And they favor a small group of people within their country, and the rest have to struggle or even find themselves in a position of shortage or lack. And as we mentioned yesterday, this is continuation of the topic that we discussed in the previous verse, that this is what you'll see now. There are countries all over the world now that are going through tremendous crises, economic, social, political crises. It's not just in one or two areas of the world. There are many countries now that are actually starting to undergo a collapse of their, demoniac culture, you might say. In other words, when something is not in line with the Lord's arrangement, then there is greed, there is sinfulness, there is political posturing, there is nepotism, there's various types of anomalies in the world. And therefore, because these things cannot sustain people, ultimately they break down, and the whole social, economic, and political systems also start to break down. The world thinks today the problems are just economic readjustment, but that's not the problem. Problem is moral turpitude. When people are sinful and they live against the laws of God and they exploit others, then you have so many problems. And then, of course, and once after some time, it implodes. Implodes means that it destroys itself. And then it becomes obvious that we're living in the wrong way. But sometimes it's too late when it gets to a certain level of corruption, certain level of degradation, certain level of greed. Greed is the problem. More and more and more. So the whole society teaches that you have to have more, you have to have this, you need this. So they rape the earth. You go into the different stores, into the modern countries, and the shelves are full of all kinds of junk that people don't need, all coming from the earth. And they sometimes in these supermarkets, if they have extra vegetables that can't be sold, they throw them away. Or they have policies in order to keep the prices down that farmers have to take their food and destroy them or throw them in the ocean. So there's such anomalies in today's society only because of lack of God consciousness. And because the rulers are avaricious, they call it now secular state, a separation of church and state, that the state cannot follow any religious principle because secularism gives people a chance to choose how to live. But that's a false statement. When the church in certain areas of the world became corrupt and started to become greedy also, then everything started to fall down. And because in the history of Western society, many times the church was ruling the state, but because they also deviated from their religious principles and became politicians instead of guiding people according to religious principles, then this is what you have today. That they said the solution is to cut off the church from the state and make a secular state with mundane principles for governing. When the mundane principles are based on economic principles for a few powerful people who control the resources through various types of economic programs. And when it takes the form of a mass arrangement, then you have wars where one country is in competition for another over the resources of a particular country. So if we follow the laws of the Lord, which are given in the Shastras, and which are explained by the saintly persons, and we have a class of people who rule the world according to those principles, then you have God consciousness, people have everything they need, and ultimately living entities are not exploited by a small group of people. So in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it explains that the first establishment of God consciousness in the world is cow protection, cow care, by caring for and protecting the cows, not only protecting the cows, but giving the cows their natural lifestyle where they can live happily and get everything they need. They, as it says in the previous verse, when King Yudhisthira was there, the cow's milk bag was so fatty that when it would run, the milk would drip from the bag and fertilize the field, and the field would be muddy with milk. And so when you have a saintly rule, then they protect cows, they care for cows, and cows produce so many things. They fertilize the fields by walking with their hooves. Their hooves are actually means by which the fields become fertilized. And the cows just take some straw, some grass. They can also eat vegetables. And by giving them the area they need to live, protecting them, taking their resources in the form of milk, making, as Prabhupada said, you can make 200 to 300 different preparations just from milk alone. And milk is, says that milk is the miracle food for babies and old men. Prabhupada says that. Babies and old men benefit a lot from milk. And Prabhupada says, take milk, small quantities, not large quantities, and give the cow everything she needs in order to live nicely. She also gives cow dung, which can be dried and made into paddy and used for fuel, for heating, for cooking. There is, also just by being, or just like nowadays, they have this program. Somehow someone has discovered that cows are auspicious. And there's these programs that if you have a psychological problem, if you're in distress, anxiety, instead of going to a psychiatrist, they provide this program where you come and stay with the cows. And just by being with the cows, your stress goes, your anxiety goes, and people, get rid of their problems. So cows, just the psychological happiness that one gets by being around cows, because cows are by nature very sweet and very, very loving animals when they're given everything they need. If you exploit them, you try to you don't care for them according to what they require, then their personality changes and they become very defensive. And then it becomes hard to approach them because they're not happy. So when the cows are happy, society is happy. And you can see, what do they do with the cows today? Prabhupada said, we cannot even talk about it. It's so horrible. But the whole world in different countries, such as Brazil, China, US, India, and big countries like that are leading the world in slaughterhouse industries. And thousands of cows go to the slaughterhouse every day. And therefore, there is so much havoc in the world. So the first principle of establishing a saintly and very systematic culture of human existence is cow protection, cow care. Once that's established, then Brahminical culture automatically follows that nicely. We have a class of people who are saintly, who give advice to the leaders in the world and provide the spiritual guidance, medical care, and astrological advice to people in general. The Brahmins are by nature servants of the people by providing the needs of the people in different areas, especially spiritual guidance. And then they also teach the principles, how to live nicely and how to get everything you need within. And the Kshatriyas are the instruments for carrying out the will of the Brahmanas, which are guided by the Lord himself. The Brahmins are guided by the Lord, the Kshatriyas are guided by the Brahmins, who are guided by the Lord. And people who are happy, they get whatever they need, they're not exploited by the rulers. And when that is there, then God consciousness flourishes. And so it mentions in the Srimad Bhagavatam, these are the three principles of a human society: cow protection, cow care, Brahminical culture, Krishna consciousness, God consciousness, worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is the Lord's plan for the living entities, because if they live according to the plan of the Lord, then tattva deham purna janmani naiti mameti sorjuna. And when people leave their body, then they go back to the spiritual world, free from the cycle of birth and death, and have attained eternal life with the Lord in the spiritual realm. And that is the goal ultimately. But in order for that goal to be fortified and established, we need cow protection, cow care, and at the same time, a class of people to lead the society, the Brahminical class. Nowadays, the priestly class, the Brahminical class, is marginalized, and no one takes advice from them. Even within the realm of spiritual activities, even people reject Brahminical advice, thinking they know more, know better. But of course, we also have to establish and that is the process of the Krishna conscious movement, is to reestablish Brahminical culture. That's what Srila Prabhupada started with. He started with these two things. One of the first projects that he established was the New Vrindavan project in West Virginia, where Prabhupada established the idea of farm community and cow care, cow protection, agriculture, simple living. So that was one of the first projects that Prabhupada embarked upon. And he said, we want to make this community the ideal community, to establish this ideal within the world, and people can learn from this and also duplicate it in every area of the world, and then people will have everything they need to live nicely and also worship the Supreme Lord. And at the same time, train, this was Prabhupada's program, to train a class of devotees who will be Brahminically inclined. And so Prabhupada put a lot of emphasis on Brahminical culture, training devoted people to become Brahmins. And people criticized, who are from the area of India, that how can you make Brahmins out of the Europeans or the Americans? They are militias, they're low class, but Prabhupada showed through the scriptures that if one gets proper training, comes up to the standard by developing the qualities and acts in a Brahminical way, then they could be classified as Brahmins. So it's by quality and activity. It's not by janma, not by birth that, well, one becomes a Brahmin, but it's by showing the qualities. And then Prabhupada explained, of course, he's quoting Narada Muni in the Srimad Bhagavatam, where Narada Muni said, if a Sudra, one is born in a Sudra family, but is showing the qualities of a Brahmana, they must be classified as a Brahmana. And if one is born in a Brahmin family, but is showing the qualities of a Sudra, they must be classified as a Sudra. So it's not by janma, but it's by karma, by activity. But in order for karma to develop, education must be there. But Prabhupada's whole mission is spiritual education. He said our temples must be educational institutions where we guide people in God consciousness and teach them ultimately how to live according to the laws of material nature and how to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead in devotion. So that was the focus of Srila Prabhupada's movement. And he was successful to a large degree. But he also mentioned that in order for society to proliferate itself in the proper way, there must be these farm communities where cow protection, agriculture, Brahminical culture is again reestablished through education and through guidance of the Brahminical class. Now that's the future, not the future. That is what Srila Prabhupada said, that in order to proliferate God consciousness around the world, we have to establish these communities. Because he said the cities are hellish, and he said another name for city is hell. When Prabhupada was in London in 1970, I think it was 72 or 73, I can't remember the year. But Prabhupada was on one talk show when one interviewer was there and he was asking Prabhupada questions. This interviewer was known to challenge his guests in different ways. So he said to Srila Prabhupada, this was a live television broadcast. He said, Swamiji, what is your conception of hell? So Prabhupada said, London. That was his answer, London. Of course, that shocked everybody. Then Prabhupada went on to explain. He said, you have established this island very nicely, but it's always cold, rainy, the sun doesn't shine so much. And, there's hardly any proper produce on this island. If you go to London, if you go to England, they don't produce many foods. Whatever they've gotten from exploiting other countries, especially India and Africa. So, and the next day in the newspapers, on the front page of the biggest paper in London, the London Tribune, it said, Swamiji calls London hell. That was the front page statement. So, Prabhupada didn't hold back in explaining what is the situation and how we can get free from that and develop the ideal. He was always right to the point. He didn't mince words in order to patronize people's feelings or ideas. He said it like it is. And because he did, everything becomes clear. If we follow Srila Prabhupada and learn his guidance and direction for both individually and for the society, then there will be success in God consciousness throughout the world. Okay. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you so much for such a detailed class today about simple living and high thinking, and also mentioning about how the world is right now and what is going to be in the future. Yeah. Thank you so much, Maharaj. Dear devotees, any questions or comments or realizations, you can please go ahead, raise your hand. Sridevi Mataji, please go.
Thank you, Srimati. Dear Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Your points about farm communities and the urgent need for them is well taken, and I totally am with you with that, Guru Maharaj. But my question to you is this: what can we learn from the struggling farms in the US so that we don't repeat whatever mistakes they made? Because though they were started 25, 30 years ago, the model has never really taken off. I know because I lived on a farm, and they were always asking people for money. Money for maintaining the temple, money for maintaining the cow protection, money for growing grass, money, 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 money. But that is not Prabhupada's model at all. He says, grow your own food, take care of the cows nicely, and live off the land. But that hasn't happened. And I'm concerned because how do we follow Prabhupada's instructions correctly and nicely so that the model works?
Well, that's up to the leadership to adopt that and make that a primary policy. The blueprint is already there. Prabhupada has given that. The Shastras also support the statements that Srila Prabhupada has made, and Srila Prabhupada supports the Shastras. So everything is clear. It takes a class of Brahmins to understand that and then to gradually develop plans to implement that. So to a certain degree, it is happening as it's happening as a default program, not as a principle of plan. In other words, when people start seeing that the type of lifestyle that we're living, working hard in factories or working hard in different areas of the world, getting some paper money and struggling to buy food and living in cities that are full of smog and pollution and crime, then intelligent people are starting to move away from that. Even within the secular realm, there is a large movement towards back to the land. It's actually going on. But as far as we are concerned, that is our lifestyle. That is the way Krishna lived, and he's also teaching us that. So that's not for everybody. The cities will still be there. Prabhupada didn't say we should stop the cities. He said the farms are for the grihastas. They have their children, they have their needs, so they need a stable environment to get everything they need in order to live nicely. And he said for the sannyasis and brahmacharis, the sannyasis can travel from place to place, visit the cities and preach, and also visit the farms. The brahmacharis would stay in the preaching centers in the cities, preaching to people and sending them to the farms to live, or creating an environment where people get spiritual education. So it's a plan, but in order for a plan to work, you have to have leadership and you have to have vision. So many people are trying to do that on their own. Some are successful. There are projects that are actually developing in the right direction. You'll see that, and I can name a few that are in that mood and moving in the right direction. But as we see, it's not enough. There's not enough emphasis being placed upon that part of Prabhupada's mission. So when there's more emphasis, so just like this, we are here in Mayapur, and we just finished last week the ISKCON Leadership Sangha. So there were seminars based around this. Kalakanta Prabhu, who is the Minister of Cow Protection, initiated a number of seminars. There was other people who also did, explaining what was Prabhupada's plan and how to really put it into practice, what it takes. Because the transition stage is also part of the adaptation of the program. We have to go from where we are to where we want to go. So that takes a plan, it takes leadership, it takes vision, it takes qualified persons to get involved in that. So we're training. The training is there. And therefore, in order to do it successfully, Prabhupada said, you have to establish the Varnashram College. And that's brought out in a morning walk conversation in March 14th, 1974 in Vrindavan, where Prabhupada explains the whole program that he wants to establish based on, simple living, cow protection, God consciousness. And that Brahminical college means that after establishing a class of Brahmanas, they become the teachers and they guide the rest of the society by giving education to the Kshatriyas and practical knowledge to the Vaishyas. Sudras don't require education. So, so there hasn't been too much success in establishing Varnashram colleges, but that's the foundation. So here in Mayapur, we are doing that now. Bhakti Raghava Swami is building a building which will be the Varnashram College here in Mayapur, and that's in the progress. And then we'll have regular educational programs teaching people, the different varnas, how to work in a Brahminical way, how to work in a administrative way, Kshatriya way, and how to work and teach in the Vaishya way. In other words, banking, commerce, agriculture, cow protection falls within the jurisdiction of the Vaishyas. The Kshatriyas give protection to the people, make it policy, and make policy based on God consciousness and practical living. And the Brahmins are the advisors. So we have that in our society. All of that is there, but it's not organized. There are Brahmins working in that way. There are Kshatriyas working in that way, Vaishyas. But it requires organization in order for it to implement a practical plan in order for things to expand out. And that's rather than the society is doing it, what is happening is the individuals within the society are doing it. Remember, there are leaders who are focused on that particular plan. So if you do a little research, a little, fact finding, you'll see there is a lot going on. There's no question, but there is it's just starting to develop in certain areas. In other areas, there is no emphasis on that. That's the diversity of our society. There are so many programs going on, and people are emphasizing different programs. Some people are emphasizing only book distribution. Some people are emphasizing only Harinam. Others are emphasizing how to establish grihastha, how grihasthas can live within the society and take care of children and maintain their griha economically, socially, spiritually. So there's so many programs that are going on in ISKCON, but the main one is the one we just described, because that was Srila Prabhupada's. So you can't say it's not happening, but how it's happening, it's not developed to the level where it becomes the focus of the entire society, although it is happening in certain areas. So look for those areas, plug into those areas, learn more about it, and see how you can become a part of it.
Thank you, Maharaj. It's very, very gratifying to know that there are successful models, because if we follow successful models, then we will be successful. So it's very reassuring for me to know that people are following nicely Prabhupada's instructions and becoming successful in their farm projects. This is very important to know so that we don't feel demoralized and discouraged. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mataji. Namita Mataji.
Hare Krishna. I think most of my question is covered in what Sridevi Mataji asked, but still I would like to ask that living like what Yudhishthir Maharaj has portrayed for us. Like, it is like practically changing us from the roots. So before we act on it, I think most of us, we need to be ready from within. We do hear it, but I mean, we definitely lack something. So how do we work on that?
Stop being attached to your television, your mobile phone, your conveyances and different trains, planes, cars, buses, all of these things. Communication programs, transportation programs, all of these things are to facilitate economic development for a small class of people who rule the society. So gradually, a transition stage happens. So where do you start? You start with the model. So as our society, we have to create that model and show the world this is how you live. As the model becomes more and more fortified with proper persons and activities, it expands itself out and more people will come. And others will adopt that model also. So you can't change the society from the roots up the way it is now. It has to collapse first. And what you make it, how you first of all make it collapse is by living the ideal. You can't become part of the society and try to change the society as being part of the society. You have to come out of that society and create another society which is ideal, and that is our Krishna consciousness movement. And we have to make the microcosm to become the macrocosm in due course of time. And Prabhupada said that as society starts to fall apart, people in general will come to our farms for shelter. They will have no food, no place to go. Just like one person was telling me just recently that in England, the fuel prices are so high, people are paying £700 to £800 a month on just for their fuel bill. And so some people are not even taking fuel, they're shutting off their heating and putting on coats on the inside of the houses in order to stay warm because fuel prices are so high. So this is an example of how the society starts to implode and people become, what we say, in distress because they can't keep up with it. So Prabhupada said that as things become more in that direction, people will come to our farms looking for shelter. And we will engage them, not in Krishna consciousness, but in Varna, teaching them and engaging them in practical work. Once they're engaged in practical work, gradually we introduce them to the principle of God consciousness. So when Prabhupada's movement is meant to be the leader within the world, if we follow Prabhupada carefully, it will happen. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission purifying the world through the Harinam Sankirtan. So therefore, two things are needed: farm communities and Brahminical culture, of course, cow protection, and Harinam Sankirtan, which will purify the whole atmosphere and which will help to collapse this demoniac civilization. Because it's demoniac. It's based on greed, lust, and various types of programs for a select few to advantage at the expense of the majority of the people. So the answer to your question is we need to establish these programs and then develop it. And as it expands, it will become more the model for the future. Don't try to stay within the society and change it from the society. You can't, because there is so much resistance and so much competition on all levels. You have to pull yourself out of the society and work according to religious and proper human principles.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj. I think that the essence which I see here is, we getting out of this flowing so-called modern day current. So yes, thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. There is a question on chat by Narsingalila Mataji. She's asking, I have heard from Devaki Mataji seminar on spiritual culture that it will take generations for the devotees to change. Can you comment on that, Guru Maharaj? Thank you.
Well, I have to know the context of her statement before I can really give a clear answer.
Mataji, you want to?
Generation is about 25 years. That's a generation. That means you're born, and then after 25 years, those 25 years establishes another generation. But that's ongoing. So, but it depends. It depends on the leadership, depends on the vision, depends on the education, depends on how much we adopt Srila Prabhupada's program. So that could be faster or slower, but the Sankirtan movement must go on as a way for people to actually become God conscious. And so we must increase the Sankirtan movement along with the plans for natural living. Both have to go on side by side. How fast it goes? The Devaki, I guess she has some information to support her statement, but I have to know the context that she's giving that statement in before I can say anything clear. I can't say she's wrong, but ultimately when you make a futuristic statement, you have to have you have to have two things. You have to have a complete study of the history and a complete knowledge of the present. If you don't have these two things, the situation that's in the present and the ingredients that make up what was the historical phenomenon that led up to the present, unless you know both of those clearly enough, you can't make a futuristic statement. Unless you're quoting, persons who are Trikala Gyan, who know past, present, and future.
Mataji is saying thank you. Okay, Maharaj, I have a question. When we talk about exploiting the natural resources, we see I just want to tell you, like in previous days, when I was growing up in India, so we learned that we use limited water, limited everything, like we don't waste most of the things. But now after coming to America, I see that we waste a lot of things, and even water, we don't know how much water we are using. It's like taps are running all the time, and so we don't care about how we are exploiting these natural resources. And even younger generations, like our kids, they don't know the value of these things, Maharaj. So I'm just sometimes concerned, like we know that I heard in some places that few past generations, they just wasted all the natural resources. They made this planet dirty, and now they are giving this type of planet to the future generations. and they are not caring about anything else, anything about the future generations. So how to address these type of problems, and how to encourage these kids to not to exploit these natural resources and use it conservatively, Maharaj?
Oh, you tell them this, all of this is provided by God. Therefore, you should not waste God's gifts, God's property. If you say it's provided by the state or by the grocery store or by the different, companies, then it doesn't have any effect. All this is given by God. Srila Prabhupada, when he go on a morning walk, sometimes he'd see a house and the faucet would be dripping from the outside spigot of the house. Prabhupada would tell the devotee, go over there and close that spigot. Prabhupada never liked us to leave lights on in the room, and when nobody was in the room. We do that all the time. We leave electrical lights on even when nobody's in there. And we have these. So how long can this go on before these resources will become shortages? Because you're already seeing that right now. Just like I forgot what year it was, there was the whole collapse of the electrical grid in the United States happened, where there was a shutdown. There was no electricity throughout the whole eastern coast of the United States. That happened when Srila Prabhupada came to the United States. He talks about that. When I first came, there was a blackout, and I was sitting in my apartment all by myself. And what do we do when there's just blackouts? There's no resources coming. Prabhupada said, I just chanted Hare Krishna. So, yeah. There's always a saying, waste not, want not. If you waste, after a while you will be in scarcity.
Mm.
That is already happening in big countries. But I mentioned a little bit about what's happening in the UK, which is quite, people who are formerly quite normal and getting everything they need, they're standing in food lines and getting food now. This is happening right today. So society is cracking in different areas. So the big companies, rather than to, look towards a different style of living, they're just looking around the world where they can exploit more and more resources. So now China and India have become the focus of these big, powerful countries now. And they're sending their companies and their representatives to establish his business there and to use the resources of these countries to further the capitalistic exploitive system. So that's what's happening now. So there's competition, there's wars, there's shortages, and that'll continue to go on until it'll break and crack in different places, and then pretty soon you'll have chaos. What the news is showing you today is not what's happening in the world. And as I said yesterday, don't listen to the news. If you don't listen to the news, you'll learn more about what's happening, because it's all propaganda. They want you to hear what they want you to hear. But what is actually happening behind the scenes, which is not reported by the news, is not allowed, because then it's not good business, and it will also cause problems. So yeah, take your information from Krishna and from Krishna's resources, and not from the world established resource center.
Yes, Maharaj. But as we are living in this society, everyone is doing the same. And usually, you said right for Namrata Mataji, like you can't be in the society and try to change the society. So I don't know when the time will come that we'll be out of this society. But till then, I think we have to try to educate
Yeah. Education is the important thing. You can teach people, just like there's one movie. It was taken down because, the big corporations didn't want it. But you can still find it. It's called Cowspiracy. Not conspiracy, but Cowspiracy. So this was a very noble, very good-minded, people-oriented person. He wanted to make a difference with the ecology system. So I've seen the movie. I've seen it twice. And he went around, he was, taking quick showers, not recycling, plastic, paper, and all that. And then he was trying to go to these different ecological groups that have been established in order to get their support, but they wouldn't support him on anything. Finally, he decided to explore why there is so many, food shortages, and he saw it's all because of the killing of the cows or killing of the animals. It takes like 60 acres of land to graze cows, cattle, so they can fatten them up and then ultimately send them to the slaughterhouse and kill them. So they're using farmland not for planting food for people, but for animals. And so he did a lot of research, and he found that the problem in the world is cow slaughter, and that's what's causing shortages in the world. He actually came to that conclusion, which is correct. But then when he tried to, get support for his ideas, he was completely, he was blackballed, he was censored, he was rejected. And ultimately, he made this film, which is called Cowspiracy. You can find it, and it might be available in certain media sources. And he showed that the problems are cow slaughter. And he was right. It's on YouTube.
Yes, Maharaj.
Cowspiracy. Yeah, watch it. It's interesting.
DJ Illusion. Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you so much. There is a question on chat by Ilyana Mataji. She's asking, Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances, all goes to Srila Prabhupada. What happens in society when many babies, fetuses are killed by voluntary abortion? On a psychological level, in mothers who perform this act, there is a total disconnection. In my experience, there is a total denial of the soul. The suffering for the deed does not manifest itself with despair, but with a feigned indifference or laughter, but the suffering is present. My question is, what happens on a karmic level to the mother and the child, and what happens to the whole society when these acts are normalized? What are the consequences?
Hellish consequences, and that's also one of the major causes of problems in the world. If you kill, you have to be killed. So that's a life, and that life is given by God. So therefore, because of that, people who are involved with the killing of the child within the womb, they have to take birth and then also be killed. So the karmic results are there. You kill, you must be killed. And that karma, and it takes a toll on society because there is distress, anxiety, unwanted children, broken homes, so many things. So what we teach, what is the solution, is abstinence. If you don't want children, don't have sex life. But people can't control their senses, so they don't care. And the consequences is they come into a situation where they have a child, and the woman is pregnant and she doesn't want the child, or she can't afford to take care of the child. So they think the alternative is that they just kill the child, but that is sinful, because life starts at conception. Life doesn't start at birth. The child is growing in the womb automatically. If there is growth, there is life automatically. So Prabhupada said, we have to teach people ultimately to, you live according to religious principles. Sex for the procreation of children is allowed, but not for sense enjoyment. And therefore, because of that, there are so many problems. So many problems. So these two things, killing babies and killing cows, both of them are heavy karma on the world, heavy karma on the nations that support such things. If you get a president or someone who is elected official and that person is against, abortion, he doesn't last. He gets kicked out because they want that. They want that freedom to enjoy and at the same time, not be responsible for the results of that activity. So that's demoniac life. If you listen to Srila Prabhupada, he talks to people who are involved in these different industries, and they give real detailed, explanations. There was one man who came to our society. He was a doctor in India. He had to perform 35,000 abortions. 35,000 abortions. He came and he wanted to become a devotee. So, we tried to educate him. Unfortunately, because of his occupation, he couldn't stay fixed. He wasn't willing to give up his occupation, but at the same time, he wanted to practice spiritual life, which wasn't possible. So he drifted away because of that. I knew him. I met him. I talked to him personally. But he always had his reasons why abortion should go on. And we couldn't change his mind. So as long as sinful activities go on, there will be reactions. You're responsible for everything you do and everything you say. There is a concomitant reaction for everything you do and everything you say. Everything you think, no. If you think bad but don't act bad, you're not responsible. But if you speak, because speech is activity, physical activity obviously is activity, then there is a reaction to that. And karma works. Karma is the law of God. People are born because of certain karmic collections. Karma Daivanitrena explained. So Bhagavad Gita very carefully explains the laws of karma and how karma manifests itself according to the quality of that activity. You change the desire, you change the activity. When you change the activity, you change the result. You can't change simply the activity and expect people to change. Just like a person will go to jail because they've committed a crime, but they get out and they do the same thing again. Why? Because the desire seed is still within the heart. Their hearts have not changed, although they've been restricted from their sinful activity or their illegal activity. But when they get back out again, that sinful desire is still there, and then forces them to again act in the same way. So our process is to purify the heart, Cheto Darpana Marjanam. By giving Krishna consciousness, will change the desire from material to spiritual. And then when you change the desire, you change the person. Not simply by changing the activity.
Okay, thank you, Maharaj.
That's explained in the 5th canto when Maharaj Pariksit asks about to Sukadev Goswami. When after Sukadev Goswami speaks about the 28 hells and how people have to suffer for their sinful activity, as he says, is there any prachista, praschitya, yeah. So that means atonement. The word praschitya means atonement. What is the atonement for such people? But Sukadev Goswami says you cannot purify a wine-stained pot by wine. In other words, you can't keep doing the same activity. You can't simply restrict people's activity. You have to change their consciousness. And then he introduces the whole story of Ajamil as the formula, how simply by changing the consciousness, ultimately the desire gradually is changed. So that is our program, education. We're educating people in God consciousness, in qualities, Brahminical qualities. These are the educational process. Not simply, well, I do something and I don't change my consciousness. No, it's called Krishna consciousness, not my consciousness or your consciousness or dog consciousness, whatever consciousness it is. It's Krishna consciousness. So change the consciousness, you change the person.
It's important to have compassion for this soul, not compassion to the activity, but to the soul do this action.
Yeah, well, it says that when a person is suffering, if you can help them by relieving their suffering, that is human quality. If you just allow people to suffer and you can do something to make a difference, then you're contributing to their suffering. That's mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. That Prabhupada says nonviolence means to preach Krishna consciousness. Then people will become nonviolent. So compassion is the nature of the soul's existence, yeah. But just having a compassion is not enough. You have to do something. So we expect the leaders in the world to establish policies based on compassion, not on exploitation. But the world is governed by exploitation rather than compassion.
Thank you much, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Maharaj. Maharaj, do you have time? It's almost 1.5 hours to take
We'll
more
take
questions.
take Scarlett's question, and after that we'll end the call.
Okay. Scarlett Mataji, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna, thank you very, very much for this wonderful class. Actually, I have two, but okay, I will mention one question. My question is now, there are women in some country, there are women that they get raped and they get pregnant because of the rape. It was nothing that she wants to be enjoying sex, it happened. But then she will get pregnant, and this pregnant is it's nothing that she cannot take care of it. She cannot either even keep it. She doesn't want to keep it because it's a result of a rape. What should such a woman decide to do? What is the best thing to do for such a woman?
Yeah, she can go through with the pregnancy and have the child and put the child up for adoption. They have adoption programs for people to adopt newborn babies. Yeah. But if she kills the child, she's also going to get a reaction for that. So, you know, you can ask your friends to take care of the child. You can set it up to adoption agencies. You can find ways that that child can live its life somewhere in the world. If she cannot raise the child or cannot psychologically accept that child in her life, then there are alternatives, but the alternative is not to kill the child.
But in some society, in some culture, just the girl to get pregnant and you can see the girl is pregnant, that is destroyed everything in family, in their
So what are you're saying that abortion is okay? That's what
no,
you're saying.
no. I don't say that. What I want to learn, how does what was the reason that
She obviously needs help. People should care for her, protect her from the situation and go through with the pregnancy, and then take the child and put it up in the proper hands where it could grow nicely. Yeah.
does this has to do with karma?
Yeah, karma is always there. Karma is always the factor,
Okay, thank you.
A person who was raped could have been a rapist in their previous life. I'm not saying it is, but that's how the law of karma works. So yeah, but killing is not the solution. If your child does something wrong in the house and you correct it, you don't kill it.
Maharaj, there are two more questions on the chat. Is it okay if we take them?
Let's hold them because
Okay.
I do have some more engagements tonight. It's 7 o'clock here, so I have to go on with these other engagements. Yeah, so we're running short on time. So let's stop here, and then they can hold their questions because these verses are
Yeah, for tomorrow's Harrisburg class, Maharaj.
these verses are tomorrow's Harrisburg, right?
Yes, Maharaj. Is Srimad Bhagavatam first canto, 15th chapter, 1 to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 verses. I think they are together.
1, 5, 15.
1, 15, 1 to 4.
1 through 4 Thursday.
Yeah. And so
Okay.
message me to inform them.
So we'll continue on. Actually, Friday I won't be able to give the class. I just remembered I have an appointment on Friday night. And so I'm only, the next time I can give our regular class is on Saturday. So I'll have to miss Friday.
Yes, Maharaj. Sure.
Yeah, Friday night is there's some engagement. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you very much, dear
Okay.
devotees. Srila
Hare
Prabhupada ki
Krishna.
jai. His Holiness Chandramauli Maharaj ki jai. Thank you.
Take shelter of the holy name and take shelter of the association of devotees, and you'll always be in the best position to become Krishna conscious.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Jai.